I am now joined by NFL Network reporter Judy Battista. Judy, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
So I know you've been covering this league for a long time, and I feel like you're a perfect person to put into context for people and specifically Bucs fans, how impressive or unique it is for a team to be able to bring back all of its Super Bowl starters.
Yeah, it's totally sort of unheard of. During the boat parade, when Bruce was saying like, "You're coming back and you're coming back," like we were all watching it on TV thinking like, it's like not really how it usually goes, right? Like usually a team wins a Super Bowl and no surprise, guys want to get paid. Nobody blames them for it. You usually have you're usually bumping up against the salary cap if you've had a successful team, and so it just doesn't usually happen. Super Bowl teams start to get dismantled little by little. So credit to the Bucs for figuring out a way to do it. Jason Light and his band of contract makers did an incredible job keeping everybody in the fold. I mean, to return all 22 starters is really unheard of. And I know some people think like, well, is that really good for a team or do you need to keep improving? It's like, well, I think this is a unique situation for the Bucs because of how bonkers last year was. I feel like the Bucs were still an ascending team, even as they were winning the Super Bowl, certainly on offense. The defense was solid all year, but the offense was still improving even when they were winning the Super Bowl. And so I think keeping the band together for another year is really smart. You have this window with Tom Brady and go for it, keep them together and go for it again. And certainly the Bucs right now are my team to beat in the NFC. That's for sure.
I love that. And we're going to assume you're not even just saying that just because you're on a Bucs show. That this
No,
is
exactly. Not just because I like you, but yes, I mean,
yes, I appreciate
that's my real feeling.
this is the real feeling. I like it. I had to nail that down. And then, so if the Bucs do repeat, what do you think will have been the biggest off-season moves that either you or other people will point to as why?
Well, I think keeping Chris Godwin was big. Franchise tagging him was big. Keeping the guys on defense, keeping Levante David there, Shaq Barrett. I mean, Ndamukong Suh. I mean, I think keeping those pieces intact were really critical. And those were the ones that going into free agency, we thought, how are they going to manage to do all of this? So that was the real heavy lifting. And I think if we had to point to individuals, you'll point to that. But really, I think it's much more about the collective, just keeping the whole thing together. I mean, to win a Super Bowl after the kind of weird, non-existent offseason that they had last year, when the offseason disappeared last year and then even preseason games disappeared and training camp was so different, you really thought like, this is going to be an even steeper hill to climb for Brady and the offense, right? I mean, they had almost no time together except what they were doing at the high school. And so to now go in and you've had that whole season and now you've got an off season, I expect the offense to look even better than it did last year. So I think if they repeat or if they even get close to repeating, what we'll really point to, I think, is just keeping the whole thing together so that they could keep ascending.
And so now looking at this free agency picture, bringing so many people back, how has that changed your thoughts about what they could do or should do in the draft over these last couple months as you guys have been talking about that?
I think it gives them great flexibility because if you look at the draft, most teams go into the draft thinking that, at least your first round, maybe your second round pick have to be starters right away. That's just not the case for the Bucs. You brought back 22 starters. So you can reasonably look at this draft and say, like, would any of these guys start this year? I don't know. And you might even look at it and say, are all of these guys going to even make the roster? I mean, that's the situation you're in. So that gives them, I think, the luxury of real flexibility. They can afford to take some chances, to maybe pick some people who might be development kind of players, guys who you might say, let's redshirt this guy for a year, give him a year and then bring them along. Very few teams have that luxury, especially with your high picks. And I think the Bucs do this year because, again, you just brought all your starters back. You assume that those guys are all going to be your starters going through the season. That's a pretty nice position to be in when you go into a draft.
So looking at this particular draft, every year we hear about, oh, this draft is deep at X position. How does this draft line up in terms of what the Bucs might be looking at for either the developmental players or whatever you could count as a quote unquote need, as much as we talked about they might not have specific needs. How do those two things match up?
Well, I think if you want to look at any position, you would say they probably could look down the road at an edge rusher. Again, not something that you have to throw into the mix immediately, but something down the road that you want to start developing another edge rusher. That lines up just fine for how this draft is. First of all, I don't think we know yet. I mean, we've seen so many machinations at the top part of the draft, like teams scrambling to get up there. So that pushes other players down, right? I mean, if we assume that the top 3 picks are quarterbacks, maybe the top 4 picks, who knows? I don't think we're done yet with all the movement at the top part of the draft. Like that pushes players further down the list. There's high end receivers. There's a very high end tight end in this draft. So if we assume that the top teams in the draft are going to go for those players plus the quarterbacks, well, that pushes edge rushers and everybody else down to the Bucs. But again, I think they are in a really good position, because if they see an edge rusher who they think is more of like a 2nd or 3rd round pick, like they can afford to do that and develop that guy. They don't have to make a pick thinking, we need an edge rusher on day 1.
Well, I know Bucs fans can all follow you on Twitter at Judy Battista, and along with you and everyone else at NFL Network, providing the live coverage now through May 1st of the 2021 NFL Draft from Cleveland. Judy, thank you so much for your time.
Casey, thanks for having me.